Printmaking thrived in Northern Europe during the late 15th and 16th centuries. To make a print, a design carved into a wood block or incised on a metal plate was coated with ink and pressed against a sheet of paper to transfer the image. The process could then be repeated, producing numerous impressions of the same design. Spurred by the increased availability of paper and aided by the technology of the printing press, the volume of prints produced in the North grew exponentially in the last third of the 15th century. This multiplicity of the image on paper was revolutionary. Prints were relatively inexpensive to produce and easy to distribute to an open market of consumers. This offered artists a degree of freedom from the demands of wealthy patrons who had otherwise dictated artistic form through their commissions. Printmaking allowed them to take risks and experiment with new techniques and subject matter. In a period of increased urban growth and international trade, artists tapped into the power and profit of prints to amuse and instruct a widening audience avid for novelty. These images entertained, publicized local personalities, and served as aids to religious devotion. They welcomed viewers to enter unfamiliar and fantastic worlds, or to journey inward to contemplate morality and civic virtue. Like their Italian Renaissance counterparts, printmakers in Germany, Switzerland, and the Netherlands created prints that reflected a renewed interest in the ideals of classical antiquity, including the dignity and potential of the individual. At the same time, Northern artists pioneered new print genres, including landscapes and scenes of everyday life, and developed virtuoso printmaking styles that collectors coveted. Relatively small in scale and full of intricate detail, prints called for intimate interaction. They were meant to be held in the hand and contemplated alone or discussed among friends. In the Renaissance in the North, New Prints and Perspectives, we invite visitors to come closer and discover the unexpected depth and variety that defines this period of printmaking. The rare and spectacular prints on view in the exhibition are all recent additions to the National Gallery of Art's collection. Most have never been exhibited before in Washington. In addition to engravings, etchings, and woodcuts by iconic artists like Albrecht Dürer and Hendrik Goltzius, the exhibition features printmakers whose names have fallen into obscurity, but whose works reward close looking. From small religious compositions to oversized prints created as wall decorations, these works of art exemplify the innovation of graphic artists working north of the Alps, who embraced prints as vehicles for visual experimentation, self-promotion, and collaboration. The exhibition begins with a gallery devoted to prints made in what is now Germany and Switzerland, the region where print production first flourished in Northern Europe. The first work that visitors will encounter is a modest engraving by one of the seminal personalities in Western printmaking, an innovative artist now known as Master E.S., due to the initials found on some of his prints. Dated to the early 1460s, the print depicts Simon the Zealot, a lesser-known apostle. The saint holds the large, jagged-toothed saw by which he was martyred. Renaissance printmakers often depicted saints as paragons of Christian faith and virtue. These small prints were often pasted into manuscripts and collected by other artists and craftsmen as models and sources of inspiration. Here, the buttons on Simon's cloak were precisely rendered with a metalsmith's circular punch. This suggests that E.S., like many early engravers, trained as a goldsmith before taking up printmaking. Using metalsmith's tools, E.S. introduced a language of hatched and cross-hatched lines that would take engraving from simple outline description to the convincing articulation of solid form and varied surface tones. By the end of the 15th century, the transcendent skill of so-called painter printmakers would help to elevate the print medium to an art form revered and collected by an elite audience. Albrecht Dürer, who apprenticed both as a goldsmith and as a painter, became the most admired and emulated printmaker of his or any generation. An ambitious early engraving included in the exhibition demonstrates Dürer's command of the engraved line to subtly communicate texture, light and shadow, and emotion. Saint Jerome, kneeling with a tamed lion at his side, repents in the wilderness as he prepares to translate the Bible from Hebrew and Greek into Latin. Dürer places Jerome not in the Holy Land, but in a German landscape, identified from the artist's drawings of rock quarries near his native Nuremberg. Print consumers felt free to cut and adapt their sheets to suit their own purposes. Even works by Durer were subject to alteration by later hands. This sheet, dated 1508, from his engraved Passion series, was pasted to parchment or prepared animal skin. The print was then embellished to emulate a more expensive illuminated manuscript miniature within a deluxe private devotional volume. The rich hand coloring and painted border, populated with rabbits, butterflies, and birds, was added by colorist Georg Mack the Elder some 80 years after Durer's print was first published. Mack's initials, laid in gold pigment at the bottom of the image, are visible next to Durer's distinctive AD monogram and assert his role as collaborator in the finished composition. By signing prints with their initials or full name, artists sent prints into the world as mobile messengers that spread their personal style and promoted their brand. Take, for instance, this woodcut depicting an enigmatic battle of naked men and peasants set in a grove of northern firs. The print was likely intended as a showpiece to advertise the technical skill and versatility of its makers. We can only speculate about the identity of the print's designer, who is identified by the initials NH at the lower left of the composition. A tablet below the central image, however, boldly identifies Hans Lutzelberger as the print's formschneider, the term for a typically anonymous craftsman who cut another artist's design into the block for printing. The woodcut was made in 1522, the same year that Lutzelberger moved from Augsburg to Basel in search of new projects and partnerships. This tour de force sampler demonstrates his ability to carve figures, landscape elements, and printing type. Thanks to his signature, we remember his name. Look closely enough, and you might even catch a glimpse of his face. The men in loincloths at the lower left could represent comedic portraits of Lutzelberger and the print's now anonymous designer. Prints played a key role in affirming individual identity. Portrait prints could multiply a sitter's likeness, carrying the fame of a subject beyond its physical place and time. A large woodcut in the exhibition honors the memory of the deceased Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I, while a nearby etching celebrates his grandson, Charles V, and his ascent to the throne. But rulers were not the only people to gain status that printed portraits could confer. This etching honors the Protestant reformer Martin Luther, who wears a monk's cowl and a theology professor's cap. Luther challenged what he viewed as corruption in the Roman Catholic Church. His activities and refusal to renounce his radical teachings led to his permanent excommunication. Emperor Charles V branded him an outlaw in the Holy Roman Empire. Daniel Hopfer's print, issued after those events, celebrates the sitter's virtue by framing his head with a halo of light. The inscription below his likeness adds that, quote, while Luther's figure will decay, his Christian spirit will never die, end quote. Nearby, a bold print by the Swiss artist Urs Graf offers a symbolic portrait that conveys a sense of communal identity. This extravagant, faceless figure, with his confident stance, billowing sleeves, and feathered hat, holds a banner representing the Swiss canton of Bern. He's one of 16 standard bearers from a series of prints by Graf that expressed pride in Swiss independence and military strength. Here, the lines that appear white were carved into the woodblock before the remaining flat surface was inked. This audacious and uncommon printmaking technique was especially suited to its flamboyant subject. Graf himself had served as a soldier for hire, a fact that lends these prints an air of autobiographical bravado. At the heart of this first gallery, Erhard Schon's monumental woodcut of an army train from circa 1532 offers a more critical perspective on the German mercenary soldier, or Landsknecht. At a time when feudal obligations were being replaced with systems of monetary exchange, paid fighters became a symbol of regional and imperial might, lauded for their roles in repelling attacks by Ottoman invaders. Measuring more than 5 feet long, Schon's parade of warriors and their hangers-on mimics the triumphal processions of ancient Rome, in which military leaders would celebrate victories and publicly display the spoils of war. This army train, however, contains a cynical surprise at its tail. Death and 2 attendants, dressed as a German mercenary and his Ottoman adversary, remind the viewer of the devastation that follows war, especially when soldiers act immorally. Large-scale mural woodcuts, a specialty of Nuremberg print publishers, were often pinned to walls as decorations, and seldom survive intact like this spectacular example. The second section of the exhibition features prints made by artists active in present-day Belgium and the Netherlands. In the latter half of the 16th century, mercantile cities such as Antwerp and Amsterdam emerged as dominant printmaking hubs that supplied fine prints to an established market of international collectors. Printmaking in this period was typically a collaborative and commercial process. Professional printmakers translated designs by other artists into carved woodblocks or incised metal plates for replication. Print publishers often orchestrated the production of prints, financing the operation, disseminating the sheets, and reaping the primary profits from successful compositions. Among the most savvy and prolific of these publishers was Hieronymus Koch of Antwerp. Several prints on view in this section of the exhibition demonstrate the ambitious range of Koch's output, from religious and landscape subjects to inventive ornament prints. All are inscribed with his name as publisher to declare his role in bringing them to the market. In one of the sheets, an imagined perspective view designed by architect and painter Hans Vredeman de Vries, Koch is even depicted standing in front of his publishing house. His wife and business partner, Volksken Dierks, is visible inside the shop beside stacks of prints for sale. The primary audience for Koch's sophisticated etched and engraved images included intellectuals who, inspired by the ancient Greeks and Romans, pursued classical learning as a guide to personal improvement and collective ethics. Many of these prints depicted allegorical subjects and themes of virtue and vice from the Christian Bible and classical mythology. They often included eloquent inscriptions about the human struggle to lead a righteous life. One such example is this humorous engraving from 1567 by Peter van der Heyden that depicts a raucous scene of everyday life. Inside a tavern, a ragtag group of merrymakers plays music and bakes waffles to celebrate Shrove Tuesday, the evening of excess before the Christian season of Lent. The French and Flemish text at the bottom of the print welcomes the viewer to join in the revelry and shave the fool, a phrase meaning to play or tease the fool. The idiom is literally depicted to the right and embodied by the dancing dog in the foreground. At the same time, the print pokes fun at the oddball crowd, including some dressed as monks and nuns who should behave with more decorum. In the same vein, a print designed by Antwerp's Jus van Vinge and engraved by Jan Sadler in 1588 draws us into a scene of candlelit carousing fueled by music and alcohol. Once we step across the threshold and look around, however, we're met with a surprise. The intimate interactions between well-dressed couples dancing and playing games indicate that this is an upscale brothel. A procuress collects money at the door on the right as an owl perches ominously above. This seductive print carries a moralizing message, inscribed in Latin, warning the viewer about lust and overindulgence. Nearby, another of Sadler's engravings entices the viewer to participate in a more wholesome endeavor. This print, designed by Antwerp's Martin de Vos, depicts the kneeling Virgin Mary, her mouth open in song, accompanied by a heavenly ensemble. It features one of the earliest specimens of musical notation engraved for a print. The tablets held by angels reveal the 5 harmonic voice parts for an arrangement of the Magnificat, an early Christian hymn of praise. The print was a collaboration between designer, engraver, and the composer Cornelis Verdonk. Owners of this print were invited to join in the collaboration, using the music to sing along with the Virgin and the heavenly hosts. Northern artists were well aware of their Italian Renaissance counterparts. Some, such as Haarlem's Hendrik Goltzius, traveled south to study the masters in person. His 1592 engraving, The Triumph of Galatea, reproduces Raphael's famous fresco in Rome, using his own virtuosic combination of lines and hatching techniques. This large-scale print was the first to capture Raphael's coloristic effects and compete with the idealized beauty of the original. Goltzius began his career as a professional engraver, translating designs by other artists into print. In the last 2 decades of the 16th century, he also became one of the dominant publishers in the northern Netherlands. Engravers in his shop emulated his signature system of swelling and tapering lines and the elegantly exaggerated forms that came to define the late Renaissance style now known as Northern Mannerism. Like many other successful publishers, Goltzius frequently produced prints in series that encouraged consumers to purchase and contemplate multiple related compositions. This trio of engravings, dated 1596, depicts Minerva, Venus, and Juno, the protagonists of the Judgment of Paris, where the mortal Trojan prince must decide who is most beautiful. Each mythological goddess is framed by the rewards that she grants. Minerva offers wisdom and skill in battle, Venus, romantic love, Juno, wealth and power. Collectors could purchase the prints as a set and play the role of Paris, evaluating the beauty of Goltzius's compositions, but without having to choose just one. Overall, the works on view in the Renaissance in the North, New Prints and Perspectives, offer a window into the key figures and ideas that helped to shape this influential period in European printmaking. Even centuries after they emerged from the press, these prints convey the ambition, awe-inspiring skill, and collaborative spirit that fostered them. We welcome you to look closely and discover the intricate details, surprising humor, and creative energy that continue to make these prints fresh and relevant today.